the actual lining process tomorrow. And Jefferson's going to be open trench. And just a difference in the methods. Actually, this picture right here is from in front of the Civic Center getting prepped for the lining for tomorrow.
Let's actually, did I hear, this is Archie. Joe, this is Archie. Did I hear that you were going to actually get on to Madison too, or are you just staying on Montgomery?
We will be working on, but Madison will be a small section of open trench later on.
Okay, thanks.
So such two different methods of replacing or repairing. But so, all right, our first phase, we installed 2 new valves on Madison. That was done on April 15th. I tried to color code it, which is done, which is not done. So if it's in green or a green background, we've completed that task. If it's got a yellow background, we have not done it yet, or it's planned. Just trying to make it as visually quick as I can. So pit excavations and valve installations at the Civic Center were completed. We're anticipating starting the actual lining tomorrow. The guys were out there yesterday cleaning the line, getting it all prepped and televised, making sure everything's in good shape so they can apply the epoxy lining process. That'll be happening tomorrow in that small section between Madison and the Civic Center. The open trench over on Madison probably won't be happening until later in May. If everything goes according to plan, that'll be a small section shut down, but there's a lot of utilities in that intersection, so it's going to be kind of difficult to make that work. But we'll keep everyone updated. Around Columbus Circle, we'll be looking at, pit excavations were done yesterday and over this weekend. We're looking at lining around the circle next week. With the isolation valves we have in place, we should be able to isolate the lines in red so that no one is out of service. We installed the new 16-inch valve on Jefferson and East Onondaga. The valves at South Warren and Montgomery will probably be around May 17th. And the intersection here at East Onondaga and Jefferson, the valves were installed at the end of April. We'll probably be doing the open trenching between May 12th through the 18th. Now we should be able to shut this little intersection down. Nobody should be out of water service. That's why we put the isolation valves in. However, we may need to shut down the roadway. If we can keep one lane open, we will. But we'll have to look at how big the excavation's got to be to install everything, because there are some utility conflicts that we'll have to work around. Moving on to the next phase is the 300 block of Montgomery. We installed the valve north of the YMCA service so we can isolate in front of the old Carnegie Library. That won't impact anybody's service, but we're planning on pipe lining next week for that section. And then the week after that, probably lining that, let's call it the northern half of the 300 block. Before we do the lining of the northern 300 block, we have to do temporary service installs, which will probably occur next week during the pipe lining process. And while the contractor is doing the pipe lining, another crew of the contractor is going to be ahead of them to either install isolation valves or do pit excavations, which will then plate and wait for them to get to their lining process. So we'll be working around City Hall probably in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, to get all the prep work done, and then they'll be doing the lining. And then the third phase, which is over trench excavation over by the Canal Museum, will happen probably the last week of May. And then they'll move on to Jefferson. Jefferson will be open cut. So we'll probably be looking at Jefferson first week of June. And Jefferson will go block by block as we probably be on a week by week basis, block by block. And then the last little stretch is Montgomery between Harrison and Adams, which that'll happen probably mid-June. That won't impact anybody's water services or anything. We'll just take a lane of the traffic. There's 3 lanes there, so we'll probably just grab one of the lanes and keep 2 lanes open. Any questions?
Joe, you had mentioned for, I believe it was some of the work around Montgomery, that you were not anticipating traffic shutdowns, but depending on how large the scale of the work was, you may have to actually stop traffic. At what point would you know if you're going to have to stop vehicular traffic coming through, and then how can we communicate that out to the area businesses and owners?
So we'll probably start doing some test pits in this intersection this week. Once we know where the utilities are, we can, we're anticipating being in there probably the 12th. So if we know by the end of this week, we can share probably by the end of this week, beginning of next week, if we're gonna need to shut down that intersection. I think we'll be able to keep 1 lane open on East Onondaga, like they've done before, but we'll have to plate it as we go by. It'll all depend on what the lining contractor needs in that green pit up here. If it needs to get closer to the sidewalk, or if he's got to come farther out, that'll kind of dictate how much of the roadway we got to take, because there is some utility complex there.
Okay, and then will the DPW, will the transportation planner be able to appropriately sign the areas? Because I know with downtown, one of our struggles is like the one-way streets. And if you're not familiar with the area, it can be really challenging to get to your destination, never mind construction. And so being able to sign the areas just so, you know, visitors or employees who may not necessarily know alternate ways to get to their destination, you know, they won't be feeling anxious.
Yeah, we'll work with city transportation to figure out the best placement of signs. That way people can have a good idea of where they got to go. The only other spot where we might need to take the whole roadway just because of additional utility conflicts, and I just remembered this now, is that this intersection of Montgomery, there is a duct bank right over our water main. A very large, wide duct bank, probably almost 6 feet wide. Right just on the southwest corner of the old Carnegie Library. So we may end up having to get more into this intersection so they can actually put the lining head in. So that might be another road closure we have to do the lining. Thankfully, the lining doesn't take that long. So once the lining is complete, the actual lining, but we got to wait for it to cure in place and all that, we should be able to open up at least 1 lane of traffic on that intersection.
And Joe, when you say the lining shouldn't take too long and you would be able to open up another lane of traffic, you know, would that be closed for just, you know, like an hour or 2, or is this like a 1-day thing versus a week closure? What might the length of that closure look like?
I would estimate probably 1 day for them to do the lining in this area, and then they can move their equipment. A lot of it's going to be how much we got to excavate and where they got to place their equipment to actually get it into the pipe. So once they're done working, doing that lining, they can move their equipment back to the side of the road, and we can probably open up 1 lane of traffic right there. We'll keep that 300 block open to local traffic only, but there won't be any through traffic.
Hey, Joe, this is Chris Gorman. I'm just curious, when you line, what do you do about the individual services to the buildings? Do you have to then tie them in, or they're not impacted by this process? You line it and you're done.
They're not based on all the manufacturer and the contractor's experience. Anything one is not impacted by the process. If it is impacted, we will have to excavate at that service and make a new connection. But as of right now, the anticipation is that we won't have to go and do that. We will have to provide temporary service to several buildings when we get the different sections of the project. But this section right here around Columbus Circle, we've isolated all the services, so it shouldn't impact anyone.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, I can send you a copy of this PowerPoint as well with all the dates on it.
Perfect. I was trying to take screenshots with my iPhone, but if you send me the presentation, it'll be better.
I can get that to you, no problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll stop sharing and turn it over to the next group. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So John Kivelhan, you'd be heading up our next group of updates here, please.
Hey, good morning, everybody. John
Morning.
Kivelhan with the engineering department. The engineering department, as discussed previously, is 2 projects in the downtown area, both paving projects. The first paving project, State and Salina Street, it's a carryover from last year. Not much activity in the last 2 weeks in the downtown area. We have completed all the full depth reconstruction on State Street. So until we start paving there really won't be a lot more activity on State Street other than 88 Corners. Contractor currently is focusing his efforts on the section of State Street south of Adams, which is out of the downtown area. As I said, we met with the downtown group last week for the 300 and 400 blocks to discuss possible closures. We have secured additional funds to complete that extra work. The timing of that is still to be determined. Right after this meeting, I have another bi-weekly construction meeting on the paving project where I can get more information on possible scheduling of that work. Currently, you will see some activity on Salina Street. Today, it started yesterday and today. That is independent construction of the paving project. It's Verizon doing some utility construction in advance of the paving project. And you'll see several sites along Salina Street over the next week or two being constructed by Verizon. The other paving project, which is for Clinton, Jefferson, Montgomery, and Warren, that contract has not been awarded yet. It's in the process of getting awarded. So once it's awarded, we'll have more information on schedule and start times. And that's it on the paving projects. If anybody's got any questions.
John, just because we had received some questions yesterday about Verizon's work on Salina Street, about how long is that anticipated to last?
I believe by today they will be done with their trenching. They then have to install a conduit. They have to leave the trench exposed because they have to test it. It has to be witnessed by National Grid personnel. Once that's being witnessed, then the trench can get backfilled. While the trenches while they're waiting for the inspection, the trenches will be plated so traffic can still traverse down Salina Street. So I'm thinking a couple of days for each site.
Okay. Yeah, we had one of the businesses, they had mentioned in the morning that the road had been closed at Onondaga Street, so they were unable to get through. And so if there's a way, if we're able to get a schedule for Verizon in other areas where they may be working, it would be helpful to give a heads up to the area businesses.
You said Salina Street was closed or Onondaga was closed?
They mentioned that Salina Street was closed at Onondaga Street. So they have a
Because
business on the 400
they
block.
sh-
They were not able
yeah.
to access it.
I'll look into that. They should not be closing down any street, so.
Yeah, that was, yes, please. That was the information that had been passed
Yep.
along. Thank you.
Yep.
And there's a question in the chat, I believe, John, for you. What blocks of South Warren Street are planned for paving this year?
Warren Street, we are doing from Water Street south to Salina Street. So more or less the entire length of Warren Street downtown.
Yeah, just south of Billings Park, right, is where they come together?
Yes, correct. Yep, right in front of the Central Tech building.
Thank you. Any other questions for John or the engineering department? All right. Chris Gorman with National Grid. Are there any updates you're able to share with the team?
Yeah, so work plan is to follow city water on East Jefferson Street. We're only going to do the one block next to the cathedral and Mizpah Tower. But looking at Joe's time frame here, it looks like things may be a little bit tight. You know, we're keeping the Arts and Crafts Festival in mind, but we should be able to accommodate that. And then the other information I gleaned from Joe's pipelining, because we're going to be going from Montgomery at that East Jefferson intersection all the way up past City Hall. But we want to make sure that we coordinate with the water department. We're not both working in those same blocks. So we're still several weeks away for National Grid's work in those two areas.
And then will there be any disruption to service planned?
Potentially for a day. When we line the pipe, we have to ungas it, if you will, and then excavate where each service is, excuse me, to tie in. So we'll arrange that on a customer by customer basis just for the day when we cut from the old system and tie into the new. The only block that really has the most customers is the one with the Y. As you go further north, there's fewer and fewer services. So.
Great. Any questions for Chris and National Grid? Just wanted to share, I had put the link in the chat, but thank you to Brianka and Eric with the city's business development department for creating a space on the city's website where all of these meeting notes and now the video recordings will also be housed. So just wanted to put that quick link in there as well. And there's also an email link available to people if you have any just general project questions. The business development team is going to be able to point those in the right direction to get answers for any questions that may come up. Were there any other general comments or questions anyone had for the group? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. So we will type up the minutes, we'll get them posted on the city's website and plan to see you all not next week, but the week after. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marco.